Hi, Village Church family. I'm here today talking with Kevin Chandler. He and his family have been attending Village Church since 2007, and he is also a local police officer and worked as a student resource officer, so has a lot of background experience in technology and sharing with parents about wisdom in this area. So welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Shelley.
Thanks for talking with us today. So we're going to talk about technology safety. So in light of the situation that we're in with our kids on technology, so much more right now, what's new? What are we missing as parents right now, or we're not aware of?
Well, I know for us in our home, with everybody being home and school being done in a digital format, our kids are on devices and have their own devices to use for several hours a day. And that's very different from the culture we had in our home before, where they basically shared one device and it was monitored. They were restricted pretty heavily to the point where they didn't really get a whole lot of time to do that. So it's a big culture shift in our home. I would venture to guess that many families are experiencing similar circumstances where suddenly their kids have to be on computers or tablets for several hours a day. So we're trying to adjust to that reality, right? So that poses a lot of new and interesting dynamics in the family, and parents who really were intentional and are still want to be intentional and are trying really hard to protect their kids are now having to catch up. And many of us are scrambling just to figure out how to get the kids' schoolwork done, balance jobs with now being teachers at home. And that can be really overwhelming, and that's very understandable. So I think today we're just want to give some parents some encouragement, saying you can do this, and hopefully give some tips on how to do that better.
Awesome. Well, exactly that, Kevin. Can you share some tips, some advice for parents as we navigate this new life in our homes with our kids?
Yeah, and it starts really with much of the same advice that we would give parents and kids before this happened. But it's, I think, rather than try and overwhelm anybody with a bunch of insight and rules, I think let's just hammer it down to a few key things. So one of the things is understanding that as parents, the devices your kids are using are not theirs. They're in your home. They belong to you. They may belong to a school district or something like that, but in your home, the kids really don't have a right to privacy with what they're doing online. And we want to create a culture as parents where the kids don't expect that kind of privacy, especially at a young age. As they grow older and more mature, we can kind of incrementally increase that leash, so to speak, and give them more space. But really for parents, especially those who have younger kids who may not be used to having their own device, we want to set those precedents early right now. And this is a great opportunity to do that and to start having some of those conversations that maybe we have been putting off or have, in some cases, just not known how to have before. I know. So one example from our home, just yesterday, one of my daughters was doing her homework on her school issued laptop, and my wife noticed that she was kind of unusually giddy for doing homework. And so we looked into it, and turns out that one of the programs that she was using as part of her school homework allowed for the kids to chat with one another. And we had no idea about that. And it turns out like she can actually communicate with other kids who don't even go to her school, and we don't know who they are. Now, fortunately, in this case, after looking into it, we determined that the kids only have a very limited amount of written text responses they can give to each other, and so there really wasn't any danger in this case of her exposing important information or putting herself in a bad spot. But what it did was offer an opportunity to have that discussion of, what happens when we chat with people who we don't know. Is that a healthy thing to do, and what are our motivations when doing that? So it happens all the time, and it's just a matter of picking up on some of those cues as parents and asking the questions of our kids. You know, at any time, I want my kids to be able to freely hand me their device, and I can ask questions of, hey, what have you been up to? And tell me what this app is or what it does. As parents, we should have all the passwords to our kids' accounts, so at any time we can log in and just kind of check up on them. Many parents find that overwhelming, but really we consider that the best practice, because especially again, if we start that early, the kids will grow up in a culture where it's expected that they don't have secrets on their digital world that they are keeping from the people who love and want to protect them the most. So
yeah, that's great. So go ahead.
But well, I'll there's a couple other things that really when we do these classes for parents and kids, we really want to emphasize. For the kids, we teach them that everything they do in the digital world is potentially open to be seen by anybody. So everything's permanent, because once it's out there, we can't necessarily take it back. And so that's another just tip as parents, or a tool to use to say, hey, look, if you're putting this out there for the world to see, then I should be the one to be able to see it anytime I want. So reminding kids of that tip as well is really important.
That's good. So what about apps that parents might not be familiar with, or websites that their schools are having them use and they don't understand? What would you recommend parents do?
Yeah. Well, certainly we want to hope that the school districts are selecting the programs that are safe for kids. But I wouldn't assume as a parent that just because we send a kid to a certain website that the school gave you a login to, that it's completely safe. We want to just double check, hey, what are the features? Does this have a chat function? Chat functions are one of the biggest red flags of being able to, for people who don't know our kids, to be able to talk to them and potentially get information. So beyond that, I would just say, for apps and websites that your kids are hanging out at, I would encourage parents, if you don't know it, do the research. The reality is we are playing catch up to our kids. They are much more ahead of the game as far as like what's trending and what's popular. And we can be frustrated at that, or we can do what we can to just educate ourselves and learn about it. The website that I would encourage parents to go to is commonsensemedia.org. That's commonsensemedia.org. And what they will provide are reviews from a parent's perspective for apps, video games, websites, movies, TV shows, all the digital realm that our kids are accessing. They're going to give you insight as to why the kids enjoy that app, what the features are, and some potential dangers that are associated with those apps. So that's the place I would start as a parent. And beyond that, if you have red flags, look into them. Ask other parents and utilize resources that you have to educate yourself. And when we do that, we won't catch everything, and we have to give ourselves grace on that. But let's set ourselves up for the best success possible.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and just some encouragement and advice for parents. As we close, parents, I want to remind you that we do not have a spirit of fear. God has given us a spirit of power and love and self-control. So we don't have to be led by fear in all of this, but just for love of our kids. So thanks, Kevin, and see you later, everyone. Bye.